What's going on, everybody? I am Jam Boom Boom, the world premiere, and this is a segment I like to call How I Devised It. Maybe I'll put an effect right here. How I Devised It, the Jagwire. So I'm gonna call this segment How I Devised It versus How I Wrote It, because only about 10 to 15% of the actual play was spent writing it. And that's to say that coming up with the concept, lingering on ideas, all the mental work first, gathering historical research, memory recollection, getting input from others, that was like the main bulk, and why I want to call it devising versus writing or creating it. Devising it first mentally, and then once I had all the information and the inspiration, writing it really wrote itself. And yeah, so there are 6 factors that went into devising the Jagwire. So the first is memory recollection, then asking myself questions, observing my environment. I got my notes right here, down here, so yeah. Observing my environment, number 3, historical context, the collaboration and exploration phase, and then having the structure for the writing. So I'll just go in that order that I listed. So memory recollection, and I might sound like a broken record right now, but the main inspiration for the Jagwire, well, I'll say this, the Jagwire is one of the series that is under the category Lost Dogs Chase Tales. That's the name of the entire series. So kind of going with that virtue or that principle of, you know, a play on words, Lost Dogs Chase Tales, but moments in my life and memories that I have, either traumatic, good, triumphant, or failures. These were moments that I felt the most lost, that I needed to cling on to my spirituality, or I needed to ask someone, a friend or a family member. These were moments in time that I was really going through it. So in order to get myself out of the situation, I created this series called Lost Dogs Chase Tales, and they're about 12 to 16 different stories or different tales. You get it, like a tale, but Lost Dogs Chase Tales, okay. So yeah, so the Jagwire was memory recollection. It was inspired by a real moment that happened in my life. This was back in 2018, and I was working as a barista downtown. So I would take the bus from my place downtown to the coffee shop, and it was this bypass that I would get to maybe like 4 or 5 stops before my stop at the coffee shop. And this bypass with the truck. And so imagine, you know, you're on a bus, you're going underneath the bypass where the train goes through, wherever it goes to. And there's these kind of levels that are sitting on both sides of the bypass that you go underneath. They kind of look like stairs. So on the right side, depending on the way that I was going towards the coffee shop, it would be this stuffed animal. And it was probably a leopard, but I called it a Jagwire. And it was just perched. It was just sitting right here. I mean, like, it was just sitting right there, but here, I'll show you what it looked like. It looked just like this. And it was just perched there, like, so purposefully. At least that's what I thought at the time. I mean, someone could have really just thrown it up there. But what really got me was that it was there damn near every time I took the bus. When it was raining, it was there. When it was super windy, it was there. Every single day, it was there, until it wasn't. And that's when I got the inspiration, or part 2, how I wrote the Jagwire, was asking myself questions. Excuse me real quick. I just had lunch, so. All right, we good, we back. So number 2, asking myself questions. So when I didn't see this Jagwire, this stuffed animal there, I'm like, well, where did it go? Did someone take it down? Is it taking a break? Where did this stuffed animal go? Like, hello? So in having this mindset of stories and narratives and how do things come to be, and why are things the way things are, I started asking myself, and you gotta have a sense of humor. You gotta have a sense of humor to create. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I thought in the wildest context, like, what if this Jagwire comes to life at night? And like, but it's not, you know, like I mean, it's a primitive animal, but it's not like, you know, it has some sort of intelligence to it, some sort of overall good with it. So what if it protects people? What if it goes out and, like, you know, on some Spider-Man superhero type of thing, like goes into the alleyways, helps people out getting mugged, or, you know, things like that. So this is like, you know, it was a joke. And again, this is still all very mental. I'm just like, what if, asking myself these questions. So number 3 is to observe the environment. And living in a city, just like any damn city, you're going to have the good and the bad, mostly the bad. You're going to have the media cover, you know, all the bad news that happens, all the shootings, all the murder, all the crimes, all the what are we going to do about it, all the responses, but no solutions, you know? So observing my environment and understanding what is the significance of this totem, of this stuffed animal that is perched up in an area that is very messed up, as far as financially, as far as the history, as far as the crime rate and what have you. So starting with the memory, asking myself these questions and observing my environment to get the significance. Because, you know, we can say, you know, everything is everything, and we can say things, you know, either happen for a reason, it is what it is, but in creating a story and creating a narrative, wanting to have, in the early process, wanting to have that idea that this happens for a reason. And then that'll spiral out into the narrative, either coming to a full circle, making sense, and things of that nature. So those were like, this is the very, very early stages. This is when I was still writing in my journal, writing in my notes on my phone, just putting together ideas. That's another thing. And this is separate from just these steps in this process, but having a place, either doing it mentally, but honestly writing it down if it's something that you want to bring into fruition, if it's something that you want to physicalize, materialize, writing it down, either pen and paper, either notes on your phone, having a specific app to do that that's like separate from Facebook and social media, having an app that's different from all of those, you know, apps that you go to for enjoyment. And this is where you go to log in your inspirations, and keeping it like that, because, you know, just in thinking of what it takes to create a narrative or create a story or a play, there's going to be a lot of resistance. You're going to say, oh no, not that, you know. Oh, even with me, I'll use myself as an example. Oh, what, a stuffed animal, you know, like, no, that don't make no sense. That don't make no damn sense. You know, there is going to be that resistance, but trusting that eventually it'll make sense, that eventually you will come to, okay, I have something to work with, even if it's not something that you stick with by the end. And there were a lot of ideas and concepts, especially when I start to get into this next part of creating the play. There are a lot of things that I just threw out as far as like, wanting to have this, which eventually I probably still could, but for the sake of this version of the audio play, wanting to have like a Jagwire showdown, wanting to make the story more about kind of what the Jagwire protects versus creating the environment and why the Jagwire is there. Because originally I had an idea that the Jagwire would protect the homeless, which essentially it still could, but incorporating this kind of showdown, this kind of the Jamal central character kind of going underneath the wing or the paw of the Jagwire and learning how to like attack people without killing them. And this is like, you know, in early story development, I am already thinking of this like a movie, but I'm just like, how, that doesn't make sense if I want to convey this in a play format, as far as maybe audio play or a staged reading or something to put on the stage. That's just not going to play out. So I decided to keep that. But these are still just things that are logged into my journal, that are logged into my notes app. But yeah, little tangent, but we back. So 1, utilizing memory recollection, good, bad, ugly, sad, beautiful. Asking myself questions. Why am I so fascinated in this thing? For me, it was consistently seeing it. And it was also the space that I was in back in 2018 too, where I'm questioning my existence. I'm denying certain mentalities and philosophies, but I'm also wanting to find, okay, then what is my thing? So this is just where I was at the space and time. Observing my environment and knowing that things are messed up, not just based on how the news portrays it, but just what you've experienced, what I've seen and what I've heard about my environment. And so number 4 is the historical context So one of my, hold on, I thought I had a folder for this, but I think that, you know what? I'ma just say it. Yeah, this is my synopsis here. So the historical context, and shout out to Dr. Kalima Young and Professor Ada Pinkston. They taught a class for the fall semester 2022 that just passed, titled Black in the City. And it's basically a historical account, well-researched account of the founding of Baltimore. And the culmination of the course, because they're mostly artists taking the course, was to create a creative interpretation of the historical context that was covered in the course. So me already having this idea of the Jagwire, and shout out to everyone who was involved in creating the demo version that I put on in 2021. It was still in its early stages, but honestly, this historical context and the research that I learned in this course really brought the story to life. Where, sure, you know, we can just say Baltimore's messed up, or we can say any city is messed up, but specifically having the details in where this inequality started, or where the idea of segregating communities started. Honestly, as a writer, and sure, you know, the Jagwire is fiction, but having this as kind of a foundation or a ledge or something to jump off of, it really, for me, it helps to ground the work, and it makes it more real. It makes it that, okay, we can all have the same starting point, but our interpretation is gonna be different. And the Jagwire is merely my interpretation of what it is that I'm observing. So, also, why the Jagwire? So in doing shout out to that course. And I was gonna pull up some of the information from that course, but I don't really know if I can, and I don't want to waste time trying to pull that up right now. And I don't know if I can show their research on like the internet and stuff, because it's their research. But they got like weeks worth slides and archives, and oh man, it's really good. All right, Jam Boom Boom, the world premiere. I'm back. My storage want to be hating. They just keep telling me to buy the $9.99 a month. I don't want to do that, so I had to delete some things. But we back. All right, like we never left. So in continuing, picking up where I left off, finishing up number 4, the historical context, doing some research and understanding what a Jagwire is throughout history, and what it mostly represents is the guardian of the underworld. And this is according to Mayan culture. And so understanding, without being too spooked out, like understanding what heaven and hell is. Heaven and hell is merely what we create out of our minds. And then when we open our eyes, okay, well, according to these geographical cities and states that we live in, what is considered hell, where things go bad? Well, according to the news and the media and what everyone's been saying all of our damn lives, that's going to be the city. That's going to be the metropolitan area. That's going to be hell. And then where is heaven? Perhaps the suburbs, perhaps the county. So when this Jagwire is not being a stuffed animal perched on the ledge, it miraculously turns into a real Jagwire at night and protects the unprotected. So this answers my question number 2, asking myself questions and fulfilling those things. And you can do that through historical research, being inspired by the research by the people who have already been in the field, who might have already been thinking about these ideas before you, and using that as a springboard for your creative interpretation of those facts or statistics, or of the oral tradition, and how the interpretations and the allegories of these animals that have been living on the planet for eons, how have different cultures interpreted that. So yeah, going back to my wild imagination and answering those questions within, you know, having that aha moment, that boom moment of like, oh, whoa, so, you know, even if it's something made up and fantasy, like the Jagwire story, like, wow, so what if, so according to Mayan culture, the Jagwire can end up protecting the umbrella. There it is. And then this creating, again, the circumstance of the environment. I won't say I'll continue to use the Jagwire as an example, but that being the basis and holding together this storyline of the significance of the Jagwire in this particular story. It can be a continuation of another. I'm just checking the time to see if it's really recorded. All right, cool. It could be a continuation of the myths that were laid, you know, centuries ago, or it can be something completely new, which is the space that I'm in. And maybe somewhere down the line, it'll make sense. Okay, tangent over. So number 5, we have collaboration and exploration. And so this is where I realized that the video had left off. So let's go back. So shout out to Shane Starflyer. He designed the Lost Dogs Chase Tales Jagwire poster in 2021. And it's just incredible. Every time I look at it, I'm just like, wow. And shout out to the OG casting characters of the Jagwire. So this semester, I took a course called text construction. And essentially it was a playwriting class. And every week the professor gave us a prompt to work with. A new exploration, a new theme, mostly dealing with form, you know. For example, what inspired me for this new character here named Genesis, in my original transcript, my original script that I wrote in 2021 had a narrator. And this was essentially someone just, you know, heavy rainfall. Everyone packed it on the bus. The boy got up, you know, like a very just thinking of an audio play and kind of wanted to create the visual world through words. But I wanted to challenge myself and get rid of that narrator to kind of create and to rely, because I knew this was going to be an audio play, to rely on the sounds and the words to build the world. And honestly, not to pat myself on, let me do it. I think I did that. You know, I did that. We did that. And it made for a great read without having a big oversoul say, and no, this is what's happened. You can literally hear it. And if you want to, you can hear it again. So this collaboration, the prompt in the playwriting class that I was talking about, it was to take found text and like as in something that you read on Facebook, on Twitter, something that you read in the newspaper, and taking that found text, using it as a quote within your assignment, within your exploration, within your story. And then I'm trying to remember, it was that, and then it was also to interview somebody. Like interview somebody and ask them a question. You know what, for the sake of time, I can't remember, but I think it was the found text and interviewing somebody, asking them a question, and then using their responses within your play, within the story. And shout out to Coco Chanel. I can't exactly remember, but shout out to Coco Chanel, because I remember I interviewed her a few months back, and I kind of created the scenario for her to answer a question, and she answered them. And this is what essentially built this first scene in the Jagwire. Oh, and this is the, let me go back. This is the downloadable version that is available for purchase. You can email me at boomcommunity10@gmail.com. So yeah, this interview and the text and the responses that I got from Chanel built this first scene, and I'll just call them scenes. This Genesis character, and Genesis turned into, from Chanel's responses and from her answers, I was getting very much an investigative journalist. And then this is what kind of started to answer and fulfill a lot of the parts of the story that I felt were missing within the Jagwire. You know, let's turn this into a mystery. Let's turn this into a memory recollection play where perhaps there's an interview going on that harkens back to what the audience hears as the main story. So this just ended up being everything, honestly, and answered a lot of questions for me. It gave me a new format to work within, because in this first scene, and you know, I'm just skimming through here, but you can also hear it. There's this going back and forth of the main action and then the interview that's happening between Genesis and Peaches. And they're essentially telling the story through their memory recollection. And I just thought that was so fire. You know, like for me, I'm still a new playwright, you know, do not get this thing twisted. We'll talk about that later, but to challenge myself in that way and for it to make sense and go hard, I was like, that's it right there. You know, I was so excited. And to have it, to know that I could pull it off, that it made sense within the story. Right? So yeah, that was the collaboration process. And this essentially, you know, I'm not saying, you know, let people in on the ideas that you have, you know, but if there is someone who's around you that, you know, in a similar field, or you want to get some feedback for them, or you just want to create a scenario to see how others react and respond, that idea of collaboration can come in handy, and it can eventually inspire you. And so for number 5, I put collaboration and exploration. I'm just trying to remember what I meant by exploration. Kind of just exploring new ideas. Say that you do have essentially, you know, because at first this is only like 70 pages because there's other, I put some research at the end here. But when you do have an idea, oh, let me roll down here. Yeah, hold on, y'all. Synopsis, drafts. Oh yeah. In my drafts. When you do have that idea, going back into that explorative state. When you are writing, and say that you do finally have, you know, a few pages of actual script or text, still continuing to be in that explorative state. And I think one of the biggest things that I found and explored and discovered while writing, okay, now I remember, while writing this version that you can hear on YouTube, was incorporating the relationship between Peaches and Jamal. And so, you know, making fun of myself, which is a huge part of a lot of these plays, or the Lost Dogs Chase Tales plays, is making fun of myself. So within living in Baltimore, you're going to have people who live in the city and then who live in the county. Like for me, I was born in the city, but I grew up in the county. So when it comes to how I even talk at a young age, being made fun of in that regard. And I ended up doing that within Jamal and Peaches' relationship. And it's here on page 10, where Jamal says, you know, no, Peaches asks, like, what's your deal, new boy? And he's just like, yeah, you know, I'm back home. I'm a poet. You know, I'm trying to stack up some money right quick. And then Peaches is like, you know, sizing him up, like, right quick, where you from? And then Jamal has to respond. His back is against the wall. He's like, I'm from Baltimore. What you mean? And Peaches is like, what you mean? Nah, it's fuck you mean. Your ass probably from out Towson or something, which is a town that's in the county in Baltimore. So yeah, discovering, okay, what is their relationship between Peaches and Jamal? Peaches is one of the main characters, or, well, Jamal is the central character, but Peaches ends up being this central character by providing the most information in the play. She is giving memory recollection, and it is all basically from her perspective, how she's viewing Jamal, which just makes it even more interesting, because you have this man character and you have this woman character, and then they're both at the central, but they're working in kind of different transits. And that is actually a really good segue into my last point, and that being the structure for the writing. So understanding, like I said before, playwriting is extremely new to me for lots of reasons that I'll probably get into in other videos. I shied away from writing because I felt I was observing that the narratives being talked about, I just didn't want to talk about those things, or I didn't have a perspective on those things. So I shied away from it. But recently, I've gotten the inspiration through the oral tradition. Shout out to Dolo the Pilot Man for understanding the structure of things. And by that, I mean, starting with ancient knowledge, such as astrology. I know people are like, astrology, what you talking about? No, hear me out. What I mean is that what we see, this whole idea of like the matrix and, oh God, do it. It's a structure. And if you don't understand that structure, you're going to be on the short end of the stick. If you do understand that structure, you can utilize it to build the world. So, you know, kind of John, you know, taking that down a few notches. how am I going to write a play? Okay, I know that there's chapters. I know that there's beginning, middle, and end. I know that there's climax. I know that there's this and this and that. I want to do it in my own way. So I was inspired by the structure of astrology, astronomy, to create stories and that make sense ultimately. And by make sense, I mean beginning, middle, and end. Environment is clear. Characters are clear. What's going on? These things are clear. Unless I want to make them murky on purpose, my whole goal is for it to make sense. So it's palpable. So it's accessible to everybody who listens to it. And what I have been experimenting with lately is utilizing the houses as the structure. So you have the first house, first through the 12th house. And then you have the signs that come from the houses. That's Aries to Pisces. This is in no particular order, but you have the planets that rule the houses. Yeah, that rule the houses. Planets that rule the signs. My bad. You have the planets that rule the signs. So, okay, if I'm thinking about how these transits can affect our day-to-day life, well, first starting with us, these transits as far as where the planet is, what house it's in and what sign it's in for our natal charts, and then how it's also happening simultaneously around us. How can I siphon that energy, focus in on that energy to create a story? And this is what is helping me right now, because I'm putting it to the test. This is what's helping me right now to create my narratives. And so understanding, let me see, I had an initial kind of inspiration. Let me see. Astrology esoteric breakdown. This was my initial inspiration. So as you can see, all of the Lost Dogs Chase Tales narrative trace a trine within a specific element and starting at different constellations within the element. For example, the Jagwire follows a water, fire, cuss trine, the Pisces air. So this is me understanding, again, beginning, middle, and end. And this was before I even wrote the thing. I was really sitting with and pondering on how would this even go. And this is when I thought I would have 13 chapters. Now, I don't even know if I have honestly, this is, like I said, this is how it started, but it definitely did not, I won't say that completely, because even having this in your mind about the structure subconsciously, you know what, I might have to take, but just for the sake of time, I might have to look back at this and see if I actually stuck to this, because I might have. But when it came down to creating this final version that you can read and hear, I was thinking of one particular transit, and that first having a planetary influence. So I used the moon, even though the moon is not a planet, it's a reflection. I wanted to use the moon as the tides, because even in this version of the Jagwire, and everyone has been telling me this, it seems like a part one. It seems like there is a continuation, that this is going in different places, which it very much could. Me personally, I'm over it. I'm over it. But this is very much building up the world, building up the tide. So I wanted to use the moon as a planetary influence, knowing that it controls our emotions, it represents our emotions, it represents our inner world. And starting particularly in a sign. So using the house system to create the episodes or the scenes or the chapters within your narratives, but the planet and the sign that it's in is going to influence the flow. It's going to, well, let me say that different. It's going to influence the tone. So I started and I envisioned first with the moon in Scorpio. So what is the moon in Scorpio? Understanding what that first is and what that represents and the allegories that come from it and how it eventually turned into what we can see in society as archetypes or situations that act out and play out. So the moon, understanding when it goes into the sign of Scorpio, that this is illuminating 8th house tendencies. This is illuminating what goes on behind the scenes, occult, death and transformation, giving life to death. So if we're reflecting and we're harboring on these things, it's gonna be a dark tone, but it's the moon. It's not necessarily what you see. It's not the sun. It's the moon being here. So this is what I was using and thinking about while creating this first bus scene. even where, and it acts out and it plays out right here where Jamal is really just looking at his environment and he's saying this first line, you know, like, oh, you know, he's naming all of the street names. It's like, man, what if these are all were like old warlords? Like, you know, how do these people determine the name of the streets? Like, this is some ridiculous stuff. Knowing that this is essentially what was going on behind the scenes and how the character Catherine fills him in on these things. So starting with this first scene and meditating on the moon in Scorpio, and then by the end getting to, so like from the moon going from the 8th house to the 1st house, essentially from Scorpio to Aries, where let's say the second scene would be the coffee shop. The second scene being the coffee shop, the moon going into Sagittarius. This is where I introduced the Reverend scene. So understanding the archetypes that come from Sagittarius, the influence of Sagittarius, this can end up being preachers, this can end up being teachers. And so this is where I introduced the Reverend character. So then the moon going into Capricorn, status, this is where the funeral scene is. I'm literally just doing all this mentally, so bear with me, please. The funeral scene, Capricorn. Capricorn represents the tower in tarot. Capricorn is, yeah, portrayed as the tower card, the devil card in tarot. So literally a death scene. Going back to within the story, within the Jagwire, the next scene is going back to the cafe shop, and Jamal kind of has this kind of like little slight shady confrontation with an old friend, Moon in Aquarius. So, you know, what ends up happening in this scene is that Jamal is, you know, Peaches and the character G are having this conversation of like, you know, man, this whole place is all gentrified. And Jamal's having this individual kind of singled out, might be like too smart for his own good type of opinion about the cafe shop and what it represents in the environment. So then ending in going to the club scene, and this is where I put, and then this is essentially where the moon would be in Pisces. So understanding what that influence is. This is the club scene where we see shit go down. This is Pisces representing the 12th house, representing the subconscious straight up. And literally where shit goes down, there is that, spoiler alert, there is this big old drop dead body. We see the Jagwire, like, right. And it's like, people are like, what the heck is going on? This whole idea of like things coming to the surface or things being realized, things that were brewing is now in the forefront. And so ending it with this kind of tongue-in-cheek little phone call between Jamal and Peaches, this being the moon in Aries. And this can essentially spring off into part 2, where Jamal is talking about his personal interpretation of what it is that's been happening, what transpired in the play, because it's all coming from Peaches' perspective up until this point. So understanding Aries, understanding the 1st house, understanding where the sun is exalted, and it ends with this laugh. It's very cheeky. That the Aries archetype is also like funny and witty. So kind of ending with that note and going from the moon in Scorpio to the moon in Aries. And again, this is something that I am experimenting with, and I'm putting it to the test with these plays. But this is ultimately what has helped me to devise original work. So you have first, memory recollection. So taking like a memory, beautiful, ugly, bad, sad, disgusting, traumatic. I have a few trauma plays on the horizon. 1, memory recollection. 2, asking myself questions. Whether you're in a state of asking yourself, you know, why do I exist? Or why are things the way things are? These, you know, these answers will eventually come in the form, say, whatever medium that you're working with. It doesn't necessarily have to be writing a play, but you, yeah, ask yourself those questions. It's very important. Observing your environment, looking at the way things are literally outside of yourself, that you have no power and control over, or that you didn't have a say-so in how this city was built and stuff, but still observing it and then seeing it being what it is without your bias, without your interpretation. Having historical context or doing your own research on your, whether it's fiction, mostly for fiction, it'll help enhance, it'll help inform a lot of the things that you might feel that are lacking or missing from your story. collaborating and exploring. So collaborating with others, letting them know what it is that you're working on, setting up an interview with others, and getting their input, and exploring. When you have started to get like a flow, you know, when you have started to, you know, say you have a draft of a script, take some more time to explore. Take some more time to see, what was I trying to say with this line? Or, you know, maybe I can switch up going from using a narrator because, you know, I want to create a certain tone that has to do with some Scorpionic influences or some Aries influences. I don't want it too much to be like a hold your hand throughout this, you know, explore that. And then have a structure for your writing. So using astrology as a structure, as a system to create the chapters, using the houses, the kind of the vibe. Yeah, I'm gonna still work on this. I'm gonna still work on this, but right now I'll say the planetary influence being what people are gonna leave with, or the impact that you're leaving on your audience. So I use the moon for the Jagwire. It's very emotional. It's very emo. Well, it's the most emo work that I've put out. And then the sign being like the vibe. The sign being the vibe, like Scorpionic and Capricornius, and it's Piscesus and it's Ariesus. And this was my ultimate inspiration. And this is essentially how I devised the Jagwire. Make sure you check it out on YouTube. You can also hit me up at boomcommunity10@gmail.com if you're interested in reading the script. And y'all take good care. Jam boom boom.